Here's today's little micro thesis. Because of ego, purification, difficult choices, and relearning are all needed. And that's the case on a mental and volitional level, but also on a sensational and energetic level. At Beth Zatha, a fellow is healed who's been sick for 38 years. Like the royal official, it's a miracle where on its face, Jesus doesn't do much. But the bloke in need of healing is most definitely thrown back on himself. The legend at Beth Zatha was when the water ripples, whoever gets in the pool first is healed. Awaiting a Messiah is hard because you're always waiting for some external somebody to come do a thing on your behalf, whatever that thing is. Accordingly, the invalid at Beth Zatha says, I have no one to take me down into the pool. In this case, at least in part, Jesus is that external figure who embodies the intuition speaking to the higher self. We have to face the fact that in a position of tension, making headway involves both being basically present and waiting on the energy of the spirit. Psychologically, this means unilaterally bearing burdens and watching for figure ground reversals or conversion experiences. Being present doesn't just mean ceasing to think. Egoic withdrawal was visceral and energetic as well, so humble reassertion must be visceral too. This means applying a bit of pressure in the direction of accepting aversions so as to be an active part of everything, totally present to the moment. Chakras are places of reframing, places of tension where the possibilities of a conversion experience are quite high. In each chakra, the body holds basic questions. At the root chakra, the base of the spine, we have basic questions about security. And if we wait in the tension, it's possible to stop asking why life is such a crisis and start asking how to learn life's lessons, even if learning them makes us tackle ego, attachment, aversion. At the sacral chakra, in the groin area, we have basic questions about choice, preference, and vulnerability. We suffer the loss of all that we don't choose, and we're surprised by the unanticipated downside of preference. Buddha's emphasis was different here, but Jesus, based on his prayers in Gethsemane, taught that humble desire is both possible and pivotal for the healing of the ego. The way to want humbly is this: if we can want things without manipulating how, when, or whether desires are fulfilled, then desire can be a holy and purifying thing. If we can want not just the things we prefer, but everything, then desire can connect us to deep equanimity. And if we can realize that any choice at all supplies other egos with material for judgment, whether or not it's fair, then the energy of the spirit becomes available for real, guarded, skillful presence to everything. Jesus asks the man at Beth Zatha, do you want to be made well? And it's this wider sense of wanting that he's teaching, wanting everything, not just what we prefer, wanting on God's timeline, wanting on God's terms. How disabling is it to want just those things we're attracted to and to avoid choice out of fear of judgment? Wanting everything, when it includes things we're averse to, necessarily involves exercise of gentle force to overcome the attention getting being sidelined by preference. This is why, though it was the Sabbath, Jesus said, pick up your mat and walk. For Jesus to heal on the Sabbath, for the man to carry his mat on the mandated day of rest, these rendered both men judgeable for flouting their seventh day obligations. Remember that conscious encounter with taboos is a cornerstone of Tantra. Jesus wasn't righteous when he healed on the Sabbath, nor was the invalid he healed. But righteousness is only half the journey. What remains is a deep dive into how condemnable we are, into our habits of clinging, of deferring choice when we can't bear the consequences, of tolerating our subtle manipulations. If we're awake, condemnability is a great ego reducer. To become open to everything is the beginning of internalizing Jesus. Hinduism rightly teaches us that gurus ultimately disappear because, as Ram Dass said of Maharaji, he had gone inside. Remember that the text says the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had disappeared in the crowd that was there. Later, the apostles will be told that Jesus disappeared from their sight at the ascension, and that the end of Christian contemplation will involve Jesus handing all things over to the Father so that God will be all and in all. Since the first chapter of John, we've been seeing Jesus as a sort of enfleshed call to unknowing. There's a rhythm of appearance and disappearance by which Jesus within us is highlighting attachments, helping us relax their grip, then making the energy behind that attachment available for letting go. So we have a teaching here, not just of how to wait for the energy of our cravings to shift, but also of how Jesus will act in the crowded space of our inner lives. It's a movement that'll draw the scorn, not just of the highly religious impulses of our superego, but also of the hyper-conservative figures around us. But the teacher says, my Father is working, and I also am working. Let's be clear, those who talk about divinization do not count equality with God something to be grasped, but use the divine image for compassion and healing toward themselves and others. Christian tantric practitioners are called to acceptance of everything, whether or not the work is flattering. And the divine image, in the end, is a responsibility. Despite our difficulties, and though we didn't know him initially, there is one within us who bears it easily. What the Baptists said from the start is true here as well. He must increase. We must decrease.